Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're adding to our Chinese American food hack series with a shot at the Mongolian beef from PF Chang's. This is a fun one to deconstruct because there are a number of different ways to make Mongolian beef, which gives us an opportunity to compare and contrast some of the fundamental food elements today. We'll also be taking a look at the cornstarch coating that gives us the signature crispiness that we associate with Mongolian beef, and how that can go horribly awry if we're not careful. As always, I also made a second attempt at my own version of Mongolian beef by dialing back a number of PF Chang's signature American qualities, more specifically in our use of black vinegar in lieu of brown sugar today for its subtle malted sweetness. So, let's get into it. Okay, so as with most of our wok stir fries, I'm starting things off with our customary 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by about 1 tablespoon or 1 inch's worth of finely minced ginger. Then moving on, I'm slicing up some green onions here next. We're starting off with some thin slices on our whites, then slicing our greens into fairly large planks about 1 inch long or so at least, to make sure that they pop out in our finished stir fry. Then that's actually it for our veggies. For anyone who has had PF Chang's Mongolian beef before, you'll know that there are actually no other veggies in their Mongolian beef other than the splash of green from our green onions. This, in my opinion, is a fairly unusual quality as far as wok stir fries and Mongolian beef goes, but it does make for a super simple and minimalist stir fry though. Moving on to our sauce, I'm sticking to our theme of minimalism today and keeping with a pretty simple sauce base for our PF Chang's version here. This is starting off with a 1/4 cup of soy sauce followed by just 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce. We're cutting back quite a bit on the sweetness of our dark soy sauce here in order to make room for the whole 1/4 cup of brown sugar that we're adding next, which is going to give our Mongolian beef that signature sweetness that we associate with Chinese American foods. Then I'm finishing things off with 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar, a 1/4 cup of beef stock, and a pinch of salt to taste. Moving on to our steak, I'm going with flank steak here for our PF Chang's version. This is probably the most common cut of beef that you'll find in Mongolian beef for its lean qualities. Remember that flank steak will also get pretty tough and chewy if you're not careful though, so we want to cut this stuff into fairly thin strips against the grain of the meat to combat this chewiness. Then next, once we have our steak in thin strips, I'm moving on to the most important part of Mongolian beef, which is a cornstarch coating. Our goal here is to give our steak a protective coating so that we can sear it into super crispy strips on our wok fry. This will not only create that signature crispiness that we associate with Mongolian beef, but also plays a huge role in preventing overcooking and keeps that steak from becoming overdone and chewy on the interior. Once all of our steak is nicely coated, I'm assembling a cornstarch slurry with 2 tablespoons of cornstarch plus some water, and we're heading over to the stove. Okay, so over on the stove I have my wok heating up as hot as possible. Then we're adding 4 tablespoons of vegetable oil and, as always, long yao for your non-stick surface. Then first up, we're searing our steak into crispy strips, so I'm laying these flat side down onto our wok surface and leaving undisturbed for a full 3 minutes before turning. You will find that these 3 minutes of undisturbed searing time gives our steak some of the crispiest bite that you have ever managed. But it is super important to keep in mind that your steak is also coated in cornstarch, which is the same stuff that we use to thicken up our sauce. So if you don't remember to sear the beef at this point, that cornstarch will leach off into your sauce base instead, and you'll end up with a gloopy, lumpy, inedible waste of $16 worth of flank steak like this. Don't do this. Once our steak is seared, I'm removing it from the wok, wiping down, reheating, and then long yao one more time, and we're finally ready for our wok fry. I'm starting off by blooming my aromatic elements for about 10 to 15 seconds with my garlic, ginger, and the whites of my green onions. Then I'm adding my beef to the wok fry with a quick toss, followed by my sauce mixture and the greens of my green onions. Then finally, I'm adding my cornstarch slurry here. You'll notice that I'm only adding about 1/3 of it at a time, just in case some of that cornstarch from the beef sheds off into the sauce. Then I'm tossing everything to combine until we reach our desired level of thickness, and we're ready to eat. This version of Mongolian beef hits the PF Chang's recipe right on the head. It's got all of those quintessential qualities of Mongolian beef that you know and love with no bells or whistles attached. I think the restraint that we exercised with our sauce mixture really lets that crispy flank steak shine through on its own. If I'm being totally honest though, I think we can do a little bit better, and I've got some cool tricks up my sleeve for a Can Cook version here that's going to bring this to the next level. So, let's check it out. Okay, so to start us out, our Can Cook version is going to begin pretty similar with our aromatic elements. This is some crushed and minced garlic, followed by a tablespoon of finely minced ginger, then some separated green onions with white sliced thinly and greens sliced in 1-inch planks. Then from there, we're diving into some additional veggies and textures with half of a sweet white onion cut into a large dice. These are going to go in towards the end of our wok fry for a crispy flash-cooked veggie element. We're also going to be adding some dried Tianjin peppers for a bit of added heat as well. You might recognize these from our Kung Pao chicken recipe a few months ago as well. They come up a lot in traditional Chinese wok cooking as a way to introduce some subtle heat to a stir fry. They are not edible though, so remember to go easy on this stuff unless you want inedible peppers overwhelming your stir fry. Moving on, I'm going with some top-cut sirloin steak for our Can Cook version here. As with flank steak, Angus sirloin is also a lean cut of meat with very little marbling, so we need to take some steps to help tenderize this stuff as well. The first thing that we're going to do is start by cutting this up into fairly thin strips, again also against the grain. This time though, we're going to introduce our steak to a marinade to help things tenderize a little bit. This is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of toasted sesame oil, 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine, and my personal favorite, half a teaspoon of white pepper. White pepper contains a good amount of monosodium glutamate, or MSG, which is the secret umami flavor that is frequently associated with Chinese wok cooking and works really great in meat marinades. We're letting this hang out for 30 minutes or up to an hour to tenderize, then coating our steak strips in cornstarch once again. Okay, so for our sauce here, we're going to be backing off on our sugar quite a bit and replacing it with a number of sweet elements for some more complex sweetness. This is 3 tablespoons of dark soy sauce to start, plus 2 tablespoons of black vinegar for a bit of malted sweetness. Then I'm topping this off with just 2 tablespoons of brown sugar this time, down from our 1/4 cup that we used in our PF Chang's version. Then next, this is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, a 1/4 cup of stock, 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine, and a single tablespoon of doubanjiang or fermented chili paste for a bit of heat. I'm finishing all of this off with a cornstarch slurry in a separate bowl, then we're heading over to the stove. Over on the stove, we're giving our wok a long yao, then searing our Angus steak in a pretty similar fashion by laying it flat side down 1 piece at a time and flipping it after 3 minutes. The resulting steak might look pretty similar here, but I assure you that it's actually quite a bit more tender and independently flavorful than our PF Chang's version thanks to our marinade. Then we're clearing out our wok, long yao one more time, and getting to our wok fry. I'm starting again with our aromatics, garlic, ginger, and the whites of our green onions, and then blooming until fragrant. This time though, we're introducing our Tianjin peppers pretty early in the wok fry so we can bloom out some capsaicin and heat. Then I'm adding my onions and giving a quick toss for about 1 minute, followed by our seared steak, sauce, greens of our green onions, and cornstarch slurry. Once again, we're adding our cornstarch about 1/3 at a time. Never forget this $20 waste of steak. Then I'm tossing until we reach the proper thickness with our sauce and we're ready to eat. At first look, I think the final results here might look pretty similar to our PF Chang's version, but I actually thought the extra steps that we took made a huge difference in flavor and quality. The marinade on our steak is a night and day improvement in the beef's tenderness and depth of flavor, and the addition of Tianjin peppers and doubanjiang gave a nice bit of extra heat that I think our first version was really missing out on. Dialing back some of our sugar here also played a huge role in creating a bit more complexity of flavor that was missing in our PF Chang's version, and the addition of wok fried onions gave a nice bit of added texture as well. That said, I don't think I noticed a huge difference between our flank steak and our top-cut sirloin, so if it really came down to it, I'd probably just stick with flank steak next time because it was a little bit cheaper per pound. Okay, so that's it everyone. Thanks again for tuning in as always. If you haven't yet, definitely check out some of the other PF Chang's and Panda Express hack recipes that we've done in this series. There are definitely quite a few of them now. Also, if you haven't checked it out yet, the all-new home-based woocancook.com is finally up and running. It has all of my written recipes, the schedule of upcoming streams and releases, new music from Woo Cook's beats, and a whole bunch more, so definitely hop over there next if you're looking for that stuff. As always, like, comment, subscribe, press some buttons, and generally be a good human. Alright, I'll see you soon.
Leaving with the babysitter, mama call the grave digger. Gone with the falling leaves. Am I coming?